Okay, another basketball discussion. It's becoming a regular habit to see Mr. Charles Saunders on my computer screen, but I'm loving it because it's always a fascinating conversation, either during the recorded pieces or after the recorded pieces. I always seem to learn a hell of a lot from him about the state of basketball and particularly wheelchair basketball here in South Africa. So, without much fanfare, welcome, Mr. Charles Saunders. Thanks again for your time.
Always wonderful. Thanks, Mark. Anything that to get basketball out in the public view and the hearing, and you know what, it's just important. The sport is my passion, it's my love, and at the end of the day, I always wanted it to leave some sort of legacy behind, and the legacy being basketball in South Africa and the whole of the African continent. So, yeah, thank you very much indeed once again.
Well, let's start off. It's been kind of a hectic return to play for you guys. I mean, mid-September, you guys kicked off with Terence de Bruin Cup. Then we had the Supersport Basketball Series. And then this last weekend, a bit of history was made, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Let's talk initially about the return to play, because you and I have spoken on a number of occasions about your travels throughout Africa, into the various bubbles where you saw a different style, a different way of coming back to play in terms of what was happening elsewhere on the continent. You came back with a lot of that knowledge, and over, like I said, middle of September and then towards the end of September, we had the Terence de Bruin Cup, culminating in those last or the top finalists moving through to the Supersport Series. Talk to me about how that was all put together with you and your team based on the experiences you picked up in Africa.
Yeah, look, absolutely. We've been looking for ways and means, and we've been fairly lucky in the sense that we've been able to run competition for the last 2 years, albeit under severe restrictions. The most important thing was the learning process, how to get competition to run where we could protect everybody within the actual sport itself and still have a competent set of competition that is gives a return of investment. And that was the main thing that we looked at. And it hasn't been an easy road. It's been an expensive road. And with the last podcast that we had, you stated quite clearly that we needed to adopt particular conditions, if I could put it in simple terminology. The way that FIBA and IWBF World and other world federations do things, it's a little bit different from what we have in South Africa. Most importantly was, first of all, getting the resumption of sport document through to the ministry and making sure that we complied with everything that was required under the Disaster Management Act. This wasn't a simple task because they specified certain requirements that were needed for COVID compliance protocols. Under the FIBA regulations, it is clearly defined on what we can and what we cannot do under running basketball. But under the IWBF, which is the wheelchair basketball side, they didn't have a specific code that looked at wheelchair basketball under COVID. And that was something that we had to draw up and do. So between myself and the appointed COVID compliance officer, Spongili Fondini, we drew up a document, presented it to the Ministry of Sport, who then accepted it. And it followed in line with FIBA protocol. So it was, first of all, the testing protocols that needed to come into it. That was the 2 PCR tests before the start of a competition. And then at the beginning of the competition, your rapid antigen testing. During competition, PCR testing again. And of course, to ensure that there's follow-ups after the competition to make sure that we didn't have to isolate people, had somebody who was asymptomatic passed on the actual virus to somebody else. So we've refined this now to the sense that starting with competition in the provinces, we are monitoring on a daily basis temperature variances. And that was something that we could pick up. There was a spike, and if there was a spike, immediately deal with that particular matter and disallow those particular athletes from coming into the bubble environment. So that's how it originally started, where we then sent out notification with everybody in line with the Disaster Management Act. We started doing temperature variances and blood pressure checks on every single athlete that is involved with wheelchair basketball. We then went a little bit overboard within the actual COVID protocols in the sense that we defogged the premises, we defogged the vehicles or the transports that carries all the athletes. It is the finding of spray downs and wipes on all the wheelchairs, putting in sanitary mats, sanitizing mats, I should say, and those sanitizing mats would kill the virus on the wheels of the individual wheelchair, whether it be a day chair or a sports chair. And then, of course, the process of the PPEs, making sure that everybody was masked, that the continuous wipe down, touchdowns on anything that is touched by players or sports people or service providers or whoever, to ensure that this was sanitized constantly. So between games, balls, backboard wipe down, backstop wipe down, technical equipment, defogging of the premises in the morning and defogging at nighttime, change room wipe downs, and all of this has paid dividends. We have ensured that out of the 5 tournaments that we've carried to date, we have had not one case of COVID that has appeared during the tournaments or after the tournaments. And I feel that is purely because we have maintained a particular level of sanitizing, and that sanitizing, be it the expenses that we paid, has saved lives. So that's the one way that we've got around it. And I can tell you that other sports have followed the same process that we've done, generating the health department forms so that we ensured about it, ensured that the COVID compliant officer that is put in play, he insists upon everybody with mask wearing, glove wearing, and so on and so on. So social distancing, and it's helped. It's helped to date. And coming off this international tournament now that was held last weekend, contacting everybody on a daily basis, we haven't had any cases of positive infection that has arisen to date. So I think it's working, and if we will maintain this until we are told otherwise.
So, I mean, that's great news. I mean, 5 tournaments down, 0 cases, 5-0 so far. So great start to getting back to play. Terence de Bruin, obviously for you, was a big success. I mean, the Vaal River Lions coming out there, the champions. And then that was, like I said, mid-September. And then you guys moved on to the Supersport Series, which yet again, nice television time for wheelchair basketball. Yes. I was fortunate enough to be at that particular event. Fascinating event to watch on TV. Even more fascinating to be courtside and actually not even see, to hear the crunching of those wheelchairs in some of those tackles, some of them getting violations for some of those tackles, I must admit. But exactly. Fascinating to be courtside and watch it all go down and see that. Even in a wheelchair, it is a contact sport, and the understanding that these guys are elite athletes in what they're doing, and how they're having to participate and what they've had to go through just to get to the position that they are now in, competing in front of TV audiences, in front of unfortunately not fans, because fans are not allowed. But I suppose, jumping very, very quickly, Monday must have been a great announcement for you, where fans are now allowed both indoor and outdoor, obviously up to certain numbers. But that's got to bode very, very well for your next couple of tournaments going forward.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a slow comeback. People are still very scared out there, and I don't blame them. And although we open the doors to spectators, the realization is that this virus is still very, very prevalent. And it's still lurking. Each time that you allow somebody from outside a bubble into competition, you're running a risk. And so yes, we can turn around and say, right, you're isolated, you're in this particular zone. But the fact is that anybody that comes in carrying that virus, it's airborne. We know it's airborne. We know it's surface touch. wherever that person touches, if that person coughs inside that stadium and you happen to be within a 3-meter radius, there's a very good chance that you're going to get sick. And then, of course, it spreads so very, very quickly. Within the indoor premises, it is known to spread within 6 minutes, so in close contact. So it is a concern for all of us. Would I allow this full spectator side of it at this given time period? I don't think I will. I will keep it as what we have been doing, and definitely limit it. Where if spectators do come through, they go through to a different department altogether, and monitor the game from an enclosed area rather than on open court area. So from that side, that will still be run for the rest of the year for from wheelchair basketball side. We've been successful in what we've done. Let's not change the status quo because we do so, and we have one person that falls sick, and all of a sudden we've got 116 people within a tournament that will go down with this particular virus, and we're not prepared to risk that this time. So yeah, we will keep the status quo and we'll run it accordingly.
Final question on the COVID topic. Your thoughts, wheelchair basketball's thoughts, and basketball in general's thoughts on the possibility or on mandating vaccinations next year? Like you say, you're probably going to keep status quo for the remainder of 2021, but from 2022, the mandating of vaccinations and people having had vaccinations before they enter the tournaments. What's your thoughts on that?
Look, very, very difficult as well. It's everybody's preference. I know that our president stated that he didn't have to have a vaccination, and then there's statements that there needs to be vaccinations, and the vaccination passport has now come out, and so on and so on. It's everybody's preference, and we will not force anybody to have a vaccination if they feel that it's not necessary to have one. As I've stated in past, and I'll state again, there's a lot of controversy over this whole issue, and even those that had vaccinations are still falling sick. So it's not really and truly a prevention. It's more of a cure factor, whereby the person doesn't fall as sick as somebody that hasn't had a vaccination. And again, that's the person's preference. From my side, quite simply, we follow the protocol, and the protocol basically says that those that have had vaccinations, they don't have to produce 2 PCRs before they come into a competition. They only need to produce the traveling PCR, which is 48 hours before arrival from an international destination. And during the competition, they don't have to be rigorously PCR checked, as what we experienced in Rwanda, which was 31 days of PCR checking. I found that going through to Hungary after having my vaccination, it was a matter of 48 hours before rapid antigen test on arrival, and 48 hours before departure was what I experienced. But those that did not have the vaccination, unfortunately, were checked constantly throughout the tournament. So yes, there's a lot of controversy around it, and irrespective of which way we go, if it makes things easier, then the recommendation is get vaccinated, and we don't have to go through this whole rigmarole of forced testing. On the other side as well is the philosophy behind it, whether you're taking medication on another term or you're taking the vaccination. Again, personal preference, and we're not going to enforce it from wheelchair basketball side. The only thing that we do enforce is that before arriving at the venue, okay, you do have your PCR tests, and at the venue, you do have your rapid antigen test. This way, we can assure that those entering into our so-called bubble, whether it be flexible or sealed IR bubble, are non-COVID, or shall I say, COVID-free.
Okay.
And that's basically where it comes through. Yeah. So difficult because there's a lot of opinion on it, and quite simply, we won't force anybody.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Let's move to last weekend. Like I said in the intro, a bit of history made. First time, I think, in African history that we had a world qualifying 3-on-3 basketball tournament. Is that correct?
World. Not only Africa, but world. Most definitely. This is the first World Championship qualifier that has taken place, albeit the Commonwealth Games qualifier. It's still the first of its kind in 3-on-3, and very proud to say that my executive and the service providers that assisted us really and truly came to the fore in the party. And we've set a particular standard now, which the world body has turned around and said is going to be a little bit difficult to follow. So we put the challenge out there to the rest of the world, do and see what you can do and see whether you can improve upon what Africa did. So I'm very proud of that, yes.
Absolutely. Listening to some of the commentary, and I was watching it. I was watching it from on Facebook. Listening to some of the commentary, the guys were incredibly impressed with how it was put together, how it went, how it ran, and the quality of the play. Bearing in mind that from a male wheelchair basketball point of view, it was 5 nations competing for a single place at Birmingham 2022. Yes. From the ladies' point of view, it was us up against Kenya, South Africa up against Kenya for the winner taking all, so to speak. And I suppose from a truly South African point of view, we got to say kudos. Both teams, men and women's teams, have qualified. So South Africa will represent Africa at Birmingham 2022. So I mean, that's got to also be hugely positive for wheelchair basketball here in South Africa.
Yeah, it's a pity we've got 14 Commonwealth countries in Africa, and right towards the end, and we had a full house of application. But the National Paralympic Committees within their countries just come off the Paralympics, and finances were tight, and countries had to withdraw. So those that did come through, I'd have to say really and truly well done to everybody that put it together, and those that made it out to South Africa under trying circumstances as well, because less than a week before that, our borders were still closed. And I didn't even know whether we were going to have the tournament or not. That's how tough things were. But what I can say is that those teams that came through, they really performed. Many of them have turned around to me and said, this is the start of their wheelchair campaign in their countries. They wanted to experience what it was like. A lot of those countries had never played at international level before, apart from Kenya. So very excited that we had the likes of neighbors and Central Africa that was able to get here. Apart from that, I have to turn around and say that the team that worked, and really and truly, we did not know until a week before the tournament whether we were going to host the tournament or not. And that's where we were. So the team really and truly worked a lot of long hours and put things together at very short notice. And I have to give credit to South Africa, first of all. We have hosted some of the largest World Championship tournaments in the world. And going back to rugby, cricket, soccer, athletics, swimming, so on and so on and so on. And the realities that we're faced with, netball inclusive, the realities that we are faced with, it's taking that footprint which have been successful and just tweaking it slightly for the sport that is in need. And credit needs to go through to everybody out there that has shown the way that South Africa is and can be the destination for World Championship competitions. From our side, wheelchair basketball, I'm just again extremely complimentary of my executive and what they've done and how they've gone about it. Everybody's hands-on, and everybody knows the circumstances we were in, and the financial difficulty it is to put through something on this basis. And all the service providers that just put up their hand and say, yeah, sure, we're here to help. So that's what made us successful. Absolutely.
Well, once again, congratulations for putting on and making history last weekend right here in Mzansi, in Johannesburg. It was fascinating to watch on Facebook, and like I said, to listen to the commentary and how complimentary it was of the tournament. But there's a little deeper story that I want to touch on, is that it's not just the fact that sports now are kicking off, but basketball, like many sort of fringe sports in this country, suffer that really sort of shocking situation where it's very much seen as a fringe sport. And there's not a lot of technology that's there to back up and assist in growing the sport. But that seems to be coming to an end, because your last two tournaments, the Super Sport Series Cup, as well as the IWBF Africa qualifiers, both saw you guys implement some background technology, which is, as I understand it, in the future going to assist with the administration of the sport, but more so to allow your scorekeepers to be almost to have the game at their fingertips, so to speak, but also to give fans the opportunities where they are unable to be at those games, to watch those games almost live on their mobile devices. And the technology I'm talking about is Swish app by NBN 23. I mean, talk to me a little bit more about that.
What an absolute introduction that it's come through to us. That's the one thing I can say. We were hesitant at first because it's clashing with FIBA Live and things like this, and it was a bit of a concern for me at first. But technology is the way forward. You can just see what live streaming has done for us over the last couple of competitions that we've been holding, and the reach that it's got. This Swish app, NBN 23, is just something extraordinary. It's there. It's at your fingertips. You have the ability to watch it. You have the ability to see as the person scores, to look up their stats online directly, and not have to wait per quarter or when the update comes through. And that is what is so exciting about this. The application, I think, will grow. And not only will it grow, but the envisaged reach out there is something that excited me. For return of investment to any sponsor, and I have to give a shout out to SuperSport and to Sassel as well, because they've been with us right from the beginning. And if it wasn't for them, this technical excellence program would not have been put in play, because they back it up 100%. What is great about this is that the game is changing digitally. And if we don't change with it, we're going to be left behind, and we will not be able to use that tool as a return of investment. So this was the whole fundamental idealism behind this, is to make sure that not only does our sponsor get the exposure that's needed, but also a reach into public and create a footprint not within Africa, but throughout the world, within Wheelchair Basketball South Africa. So thank you very much for the introductory. I have to turn around and say that it's been a long time coming. And as what a couple of my colleagues have said, yes, we should have done this years ago. But as another colleague says, it's never the right time until it's the right time, isn't it? So yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. So obviously we'll be watching the space to find out more about where, how, what, and how big this is going to take not only wheelchair basketball, but able-bodied basketball here in South Africa and on the African continent further. Charles, once again, thanks so much for your time. It's always interesting, exciting chatting to you, finding out how things are going. I look forward to catching up with you again soon after the next series of tournaments matches. Like you say, you've got a couple more tournaments left for the remainder of the year, and then hopefully a long, well-deserved holiday. Hopefully we can sneak one more podcast in just before that holiday, find out how the year finished out for you. But once again, thanks for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to all your listeners and the viewers out there, we've got what we call the Under-23 World Championship qualifiers taking place here in South Africa again in December. That's qualifying for World Championships. And then a month later in Ethiopia, where we have the men and women's world qualifiers. And of course, we'll be utilizing that digital app in both competitions so that everybody can be with us live.
Awesome. Great to hear. And we'll definitely be following. I've downloaded my Swish app. Hopefully people out here listening to this will download and do the same. But until next time, Charles, thanks so much.